Hey, welcome back to another edition of Warrior Spirit, the show where inner warriors shine in their light. Presented to you by Praxis 33, the company that aligns your thoughts and goals and actions to create your best life. Today, I have the pleasure of having Christian Ray Flores. Christian is an entrepreneur, an international recording artist, a philanthropist, and a dynamic high performance coach. His extraordinary journey from child refugee in Chile to entertaining millions as a pop star in Eastern Europe and leading philanthropic projects internationally to planning churches and founding international projects in the U.S. Makes Christian a uniquely dynamic speaker and compelling leader. So, Christian, welcome to the show, and I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Um, you grew up in Chile. Obviously, that's where you know how you become a refugee. How old were you when you left Chile?
I left when I was 5 years old. I was,
Okay.
yeah, so 5 years old. I arrived when I was like 6 months old, and then I left when I was five.
And do you remember the first few years in Chile?
I remember actually the first memory I have is of being in outside a concentration camp. I was standing outside of that camp. My mom is trying to pass food through some guards to my dad inside, and I think it was sort of imprinted, but that's literally my first earliest childhood memory. I think I was maybe scared. That's why it sort of stayed with me.
Mhm.
And then after that, I do remember the refugee facility and being with a bunch of families there, and sort of a bit tense situation. But even then, I was just playing with kids in the yard, and kids adjust very quickly.
Yeah, it's funny when we're kids, even those of us who've had traumatic childhoods and early traumatic things happen to us, we don't remember um, the early years of just being a child, but when others talk about it, as you just did, it's hey, I was just a kid being a kid, and I didn't know any different.
Yeah, yeah.
Where when your family was able to leave Chile, where did they migrate to?
We got asylum in Munich, Germany. So yes, that's
And
where we
how
landed.
how long did you stay in Germany?
Just a few months, actually a little bit under a year, I believe, or maybe around a year. And then my mom sort of, she was so shell shocked. She wanted to go back to the Soviet Union of all places, right? Which I look at that and I go, that was a mistake, okay, but whatever.
How, yeah, going from refugee in Chile to Russia doesn't seem um,
No,
like a
no.
great transition.
In hindsight, yeah.
When you finally settled outside that and you started having more of the early teen years and things that you can remember, where were you located at that time?
Early teens, I was in Africa. We spent a year and a half, maybe 2 years in Russia, and then we went to Africa. My dad did, then I went, then my mom and sister followed. So I basically grew up 7 to 14. I was in Africa. So early teens was in Mozambique, Maputo, Mozambique,
Hmm.
Southeast Africa.
Wow. um, as a teenager, I mean, obviously that's a harsh part of the world, even coming out of refugee camp. what was
Yeah.
what was it like as a teenager for you there? Was it easy to
No,
make
it was
friends? What did you like? How
it
did you
was it
transition?
was both. It was at first it was very confusing because I had basically changed 4 countries by age 7.
Wow.
And 3 continents by age 7, okay? And, very different countries, right? Just everything. Latin America, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and then, Southern Africa. So, at first, I was sort of confused, disoriented. My dad tells me I was quiet for a year, and, just
I
couldn't.
chuckle at that because it's hard to imagine you quiet now.
Yeah, I was quiet. I mean, I wouldn't speak in public, and he would say, "Why are you so quiet?" And I'm like, "I don't know the language. I don't understand how I fit in. That kind of thing." So it was this culture shock at first, but then kids really bounce back, right? So the rest of the time was fantastic, actually. Even though we had in the backdrop of um, the civil war started like a year in, and we got echoes of it. We're not in the middle of it. It was up north mostly, but we got bombings and things like that in the city. Um, like across the street from me, they blew up like the offices of the ANC, the African National Congress, which was Nelson Mandela's party, and he was still in jail at the time. So we saw stuff like that, but you sort of get used to it, right? As a kid, we had some food shortages. We have a lot of some types of food that were natural there, but then we had like actual ration cards for rice and bread. Horrible bread, by the way, horrible bread, and you still have ration cards, and other things like that. There were certain types of food that were very scarce, but besides that, it was actually a very glorious childhood because no supervision. The city was safe. It was tropical. We had fruit of all kinds everywhere, and we just roamed the city with a bunch of boys, and it was just really fantastic. And it was such a diverse, rich place to grow up in because um, I I went to an African school first, where I was probably one of the few, maybe a handful of non-African kids, and then I went to an international school. So the international school was literally the United Nations. They were all expat kids, diplomat kids. So you see everybody. You grew up with these kids from all over the world, which is fantastic. And the music is cool. The rhythms. You get immersed in this very exotic sort of space. We traveled a lot. We went to the beach a lot, and I just really, really enjoyed growing up there.
Now you said that you were quiet because you didn't know the language, but now you speak four languages.
Yeah.
Which four do
Yeah.
you speak?
Well, I spoke already Russian and Spanish by the time I arrived because from birth, I actually have. You probably can't see it here. Oh yeah, you see that paper at the bottom there?
Hmm.
That's a yellow piece of paper where my mom wrote. One column was Russian, my one column was Spanish of my first words, so I still have it framed. And when I arrived, they sent me to African school, and it was Portuguese, right? It was by immersion, sink or swim type situation. So of course you swim because you're a kid and you're a sponge. And then the year after that, they sent me to English school, to an international school. So same thing, sink or swim, only English. So I basically still speak those four languages.
It's I love that simply because well, my wife is Portuguese, so she was born in the Azores and is fluent in English and in Portuguese because it's similar. She understands and can speak some Spanish,
Hmm.
a little bit of Italian, but basically, and I am always amused at that because. Even though I have a master's degree, the only class I ever failed was a language class, Spanish.
Really?
I grew up in Iowa, and in the cornfields of Iowa, there was no one to speak Spanish to,
Right.
and I had an attitude because I didn't really care if it was a male tree or a female tree you
Hmm.
know so the language was very hard for me to decipher and discern, and out of all of my education, that's the only class I ever failed was a language
Fascinating.
class.
Yeah. And
So
to me, I'm the other way around. I excelled in language class for obvious reasons, and then I'm sort of creative, and I get bored quickly. So especially the 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 sciences, I was horrible at the sciences, and I also have a master's degree in economics. So like I had to take accounting and statistics, and I was just atrociously bad at this.
it's interesting. My background's in psychology, so I'm always fascinated by the brain. But for someone as creative and as free flow as you are, because when you're talking about roaming the streets and going to the beach and doing these, the music, like when you even say the word music, your face changes. You go into this little, you know,
Yeah.
you almost like feel the rhythm coming through you. So to have an extensive degree in economics, like
Hmm.
that's
It,
left brain, right brain for sure.
it really, yeah, and it served me so well because like halfway through, I already knew I wanted to do music, and I wanted to quit, and my mom would just freak out, like she would literally have a tantrum, and I would go, man, I'm gonna give her a heart attack. I better finish this thing, basically. So I stayed because of her, and uh, but you know what? I'm so grateful because like halfway in, it really got to me, the idea of economics as a science of human behavior. So on a high level, it's really not about numbers, it's really about human behavior. And it to this day, I'm a total economics geek, an absolute economics geek. Like I read stuff, I follow things, I follow economic trends. I have very strong opinions about some of the stuff that's happening in the U.S. when it comes to economic policy, right, and internationally as well. So I don't know. It was it was an unexpected gift. I never used it as a professor. Didn't go to academia. I never got a job as an economist, but I'm I really say I'm an economist. you know, uh, there's
Which
something in me that stayed.
I, I find that I find that so fascinating because you have a poster of Prince on your back wall,
Yeah,
not
I do.
Alan Greenspan.
No, no, no.
You definitely, but then you became an international pop star. So how does someone go from the streets of Mozambique to being an international pop star?
Well, it's sort of this. It's almost like these threads get together into a tapestry, get weaved into a tapestry by life, coincidence, and things like that. So the story there is that none of my family were creatives or musical. I have a distant sort of branch of the family in Chile who was super musical, but I learned that later, so I didn't have a direct influence. And I actually have a distant relative who is a Nobel Prize winner in literature. So I don't know if there's any genetic sort of predisposition. I doubt it. But so I never thought of it as a career. But I had a good voice from like age 4. My mom and dad would ask me in the living room when they had guests, sing us a song, and I would just sing a cappella songs, and I had a good voice. And then that sort of got improved and deepened, I guess. I was part of this Chilean children's choir in Africa. We were all exiles. Like there was 150 families, I think, all expats that all got kicked out of the country and for some reason imported into Mozambique because it was like a fellow Marxist country government. And they wanted somebody to run the economy for them because they had lost all the professionals. And so the kids were playing these songs like Chilean, Argentine, Brazil, Colombia, like Latin American folk music, essentially. So that Latin layer was instilled, and then we were exposed to a lot of African beats and stuff like that. So then, back in Russia, that went dormant for a few years because I had another culture shock going back to the Soviet Union and cold and just horrible, right? And and then it's sort of, but I got into breakdancing when I was 16 or something, and it was very much underground at the time, where there were maybe 100 of us in the whole country.
Breakdancing. I hope you were better than the lady from the Olympics in.
I was much better than the lady in the Olympics. Yes, that was a sensation, wasn't
she
it?
she was something. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah. So I I got into it very very seriously, and we did battles and we had like competitions but it was like underground, right? And it was the 80s, and essentially that developed. And I think maybe the economist or sort of the global citizen in me collected these things almost like as a mosaic, and I was like, okay, this can be combined. I can choreograph, I can dance, I can sing. Maybe I can do a show, maybe I can be a singer. And that sort of bubbled up eventually. And I started sort of introducing myself into the scene, and it was a new scene because there was no show business in Russia. It was all sort of government sanctioned stuff, right? There was government sanctioned everything. And when I graduated, the country collapses, right? So it's 1991. The Soviet Union ceases to exist, breaks into 15 countries, and it's free market. in every possible area. It's chaos, right? So most of my friends go into banking and finance and international trade and all of that, and some of them were getting rich real quick, and then there's millions barely eating, basically, right? It's just this massive reset, and I go, I want to do music. And so it wasn't
And
very
did
pragmatic.
and did your mother go, "What?"
She did. She totally did. My father, my mother, like, seriously, dude, you just got a degree, and
Yeah, you have this background in economics, all your friends are making money, and you wanna go into
I
music.
want to be a broke artist, basically, and
Yeah,
I was,
why not?
and but what served me well is that I I had this sort of image, this vision, um, of what I wanted exactly, and I didn't stop until I get a level of quality, like, not to go into too many rabbit holes, but music, showmanship, dance. I trained break dancers to dance like a show, because break dancers are improvisers, they're not show people. So all these things I put together, an actual brand, a sound, a signature thing, and I rolled it out to the world. And because it was such a free market thing, that people just ate it up. They just loved it. And by the end of the year, I had like 3 labels offering me contracts, and I was on national television by the end of year one, basically. So
Did
it
you
was quick.
tour with, like, the Ricky Martins of the world, or did you stay with
No, we were still fairly isolated from the world. I did hang out with people like Al Jarreau and Shaka Khan, and some other acts. Like Bonnie M was a European band that was a big band in the '70s, and they came and I did several shows with them. CNC Music Factory and a few others like that. So I did connect with international um, artists and was shared the stage sometimes, but it wasn't a global thing.
what's the, biggest crowd you played in front of?
Um, Biggest crowd probably Gorky Park, 500,000, something like that. But
Wow,
that was a bunch of us, right? Red Square, probably a couple 100,000.
wow.
Um, a solo, when it comes to a solo show, probably 60,000. That was probably the biggest crowd I played to.
So, how does someone go from, I mean, your life's amazing, refugee to international pop star, but you also have a philanthropic side of you. So you have Ascend Mission Funds, and you
Hmm.
help children in Mozambique and Ukraine. You also have been a pastor for the.
Hmm.
So how do you weave in, like, those are divergent roads? How do you
Right.
merge them?
ADHD. That's how you do it.
ADHD. Yes,
That
there's medication for that, but okay.
that's the secret sauce. Yeah, it's a condition. That's what it is.
I love it. But how do you determine? Because you're on the road, you're making music, you're teaching all these people, and
Hmm.
to have a giver's heart to want to be philanthropic, that in of itself is unique to that world.
Hmm.
And then to be in the pastoral world, how do you merge that into your life?
Well, what happened is I was at the peak of my career, and I was peaking, basically. Number one hit, doing sports arenas, touring 15 different countries, and um, my character, the parts of my character that were not mature, that were unshaped, that were undershaped, I guess, they start showing, because everything is more defined when fame comes, knocking at the door, and your flaws as well. So I was clinically depressed. I had a number one hit. I was clinically depressed. So millions of people wanted, sort of, what, thinking that I had the best life ever, and I was just miserable. And I I met this guy who was a Christian missionary. He was Canadian, and he and I was super judgmental against the Christians, like, very much. I was new agey, and I was, of course, arrogant, all of that. And I met this guy, And I was so desperate that I was like, okay, I'll listen to you. So he would speak about things, tell me about things. And once he had me over and we're having dinner in his kitchen, little Russian Moscow apartment, and he has this sweet family. And I had basically just been, my girlfriend left me because I was such a jerk to her, but she left with my baby because we had a baby together. And I was just devastated. And it dawned on me that I don't know how to live. Like on a holistic level, I don't know how to live. I know how to make music, right? I know how to entertain. I know how to dance. I know how to do a few things. I have gears, but I don't know how to live life. I just don't have the right skills. And I'm sitting there with this guy, and he has a sweet family. And I turn to him in a moment of extreme clarity, and I go, "How do I get what you have?" And he says, "I'll teach you from the Bible if you're willing to learn." And I begrudgingly go, all right, and a few weeks later, I become a Christian, get baptized, change everything. And um, with time, that sort of became a portal to all these dimensions that developed in my life professionally. Because after a while, I was like, well, I'm entertaining millions of people, but I'm not changing any lives. I'm just entertaining. And I had the sense that I can, like, if the presence of this guy in my life and of the Bible changed me so foundationally, why would I not do that for others? Basically, that was sort of the logic. So I went into that direction, and I had to basically phase out of show business slowly, but I did, and because it wasn't enough for me, basically. And I got so much bad press over that, and all of my friends thought I was out of my mind. But I'm sort of I don't know, I grew up idealistic, I guess, I lean towards causes. And then the philanthropy came in that way as well, because I had a friend who was a head of a charity, a Christian charity at the time there, and he did all this work with the orphans. And I remember from maybe a few years before that I was so impacted by musicians using their platform to help the poor, and because there was these projects like We Are the World, Band Aid, all of those, America, the United Kingdom, and now I had a platform, and it sort of clicked. And I think maybe it clicked because I became my heart just softened. I just became more compassionate as a human being, not and less selfish. And this guy was serving orphans in Moscow, so we would visit them, we would go hang out with them. I would play shows for them in the orphanage, and we would just hang out. Right. I brought horses one day, and we gave them rides around the yard or the orphanage, and it was just so much fun. It changed me, and we started doing big events right together. So I would bring some celebrity friends, bring the press, and help organize that part. Then a bunch of volunteers organized like a sports festival during the day. So a sports festival during the day and a gala concert in a big place. And we would bus in 3,000, 4,000 orphans in one location. So it just it changed me basically. Michael Jackson came to my event. So, which was like he was my hero, you know, musically, massive influence on my life. And he walks into our event,
Wow.
with his entourage and loves it. And it was just surreal. So that stayed with me. And I basically continued to work in philanthropy throughout the rest of my life. I moved to the States. I did some work in Latin America. Then I started the Ascent Mission Fund, which is sort of Mozambique primarily, because I wanted to go back to the place I grew up in, because I know the backdrop, the history, and I wanted to give. And so we have this project where we help kids get out of poverty through English mentorship and computer literacy.
And how old were you when this transformation occurred for you?
I was 26.
Oh wow. So
Hmm.
not really older in life. You made a transition pretty quickly, because
I was, yeah.
that's
Hmm.
an age where fame can get a hold of you, and you just don't want to let go of that apple at that
Yeah,
age. So
yeah. I think I've reflected quite a bit about why did it take, and my theory is this. In general, actually, that theory is about all kinds of things. Is that most of us, if we live in a sort of civilized, normal place that is relatively safe, we our season of being a student lasts for a long time, through middle school, high school, then college. So you observe life from the inside out mostly. Things happen, of course, but mostly you're a student of life rather than a practitioner of life until you're like 21, right? If you go to college. Well, if you start your life in a refugee facility, you are a practitioner of life. So you start, it's just, I think it changes the way you mature, I guess, in some ways. So I had this sort of profound, the ability to say, I don't know how to live and I'm going to fix it and I'm going to apprentice under this guy and I'm going to take it very seriously at age 26 for some reason. I don't know. Like, that's my theory, at least.
And when you had this internal change, because you were lucky to do it at 26, I didn't do it till I was 58. Like I
Mm.
stayed angry in my upbringing and my, stuff for a very long time. So when you made that change, um, and you lost a lot of friends, right? You said you lost a lot of friends. Um, how how internally did it change your relationship with the mother of your child, the people around you, your circle?
That's a good question. Some people just didn't get it, right? So I did lose a lot of friends. uh, it's like, imagine if you're the life of the party, sort of, right? I mean, I would go clubbing 4 nights a week minimum. It's just the nightlife, the glamour. It was just, that was my lifestyle. And then you become a Christian, and it's not that you're not having fun anymore, but this kind of fun doesn't appeal to you, you know and you stop having fun the way people want to have fun with you. So, and so I lost some friends there, but I acquired many others as well. And some, actually, I did help a bunch of friends become Christians, actually, who, and family members. My mom became a Christian, my sister became a Christian, my cousin became a Christian. So that was fantastic. And some people just from the network of relationships that I had joined the church as well. And um, and with the mother of my child, she actually cut me off, and she was the runway model because I thought that was the cool thing to do. And she cut me off, and she dated someone else and married somebody else. And my daughter grew up, my oldest daughter, uh, being told that other person was her dad. So it was like, I'm a walking soap opera, okay. And so until she was 6 years old, she thought somebody else was her dad. And by a miraculous set of circumstances, I actually got her back, and her mom also became a Christian. So very
It's
interesting.
not so miraculous when you're dealing in the world of God. I mean,
Oh,
it's
absolutely, yeah,
it is definitely a God thing. Is your relationship with her good now? Your
yeah.
daughter?
My daughter lives 10 minutes away from me
Oh,
here in
nice.
Austin. Yeah, so it's a complete 180 change, and it was the biggest pain in my life, actually, and that was healed and restored and redeemed.
That is awesome. And you've lived all over the world. What made you choose the United States? And at what age did you come here to start this part of your life?
I came here because I married an American, and I had no intention of going to the US at all, because I had a brand. I had a brand recognition across 15 different countries. I can do all kinds of things over there. And but she came to be with me, so she left everything and she came to be with me, and we had two other daughters together. And we had no intention of coming back. And then the weather really got to her. She has some autoimmune health issues, and it became very evident that she couldn't, like, I couldn't imagine her living in so much suffering for the next 20 years, for the foreseeable future. So I just said, look, for better or for worse, you gave everything to come and be with me. I'm going to give up everything and go to where you're from. And we moved stateside. I was 35.
And you've been here ever since?
Yeah, 20 years.
Was it always in Austin?
No, we went to Philly. I did some philanthropy work out of Philly and South Florida, and then LA for a few years, and then Austin about 12 years ago.
Wow. And So now, do you still have a? Is it like a horse ranch? You said you.
No, no, I'm still sort of an urban kind of guy. I did move out a little bit into the suburbs, a little bit to the outskirts in Austin with time. I just like being, I don't know, half an hour away from civilization, right? So at least, you know.
Your podcast, Headspace.
Yeah.
What is the like a warrior spirit is for the inner warrior to shine and to share their story.
Mhm.
What is Headspace based around?
Well, it's basically based around that your mindset defines your life, ultimately.
Hmm.
The headspace you're in defines where you're going, how you see yourself, the world around you, what you do with it, and sort of the mysteries of the human mind and soul. I mean, headspace is really more not just the intellectual piece, but the inner world.
And you get this calling to as a coach you handle high performance purpose driven professionals. You coach pastors, and you also do this podcast for Headspace, which I find interesting because I my Praxis 33 is for transformational change as well, and as you can see in the thing, mindset
Yep.
is
Yeah.
everything. So I relate to all of that. You also wrote a book or authored a book, little. I like the title, "Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America." What was that based around?
It was based around all these the excitement and the stories and the insights I had sort of living in the US as an immigrant and having all this massive sort of backdrop of three continents and five other countries. I lived in Kiev before we moved to the US. So this is my sixth country, right? And I would point things out to Deb and go, what you have here is really amazing. And I would point out something that was completely normal and baseline for her, right? She'll go, really? Is that amazing? I said, yes. I would say, yes, it's amazing. So I would just sort of point things out to her from the standpoint of, an entrepreneurial spirit, right? For example, it's almost like it's in the genetic code of America, the pursuit of happiness, sort of this philanthropic heart. It's a very philanthropic culture in Europe. Philanthropy is really the responsibility of the government. In the US, it's the responsibility of the individual primarily, and the government can do other stuff, but that's how we think collectively. Um, Faith is weaved into the fabric. Even the people that are not quote unquote believers, culturally they're very, very Bible based because the values come from there. Uh, and the list goes on and on and on. And I would point these things out to her and say, this kind of the freedom you have here, the this almost genetic antibodies against tyranny, uh, these are all amazing things, and they all came together in this one place, and you should be lucky to, this. So anyway, I would say that to her over and over again over the years. And then when there's this wave of cultural Marxism that sort of went from the fringes to mainstream dialogue or sort of discourse in America. I think it was around the COVID times. I was horrified, and I was like, Deb, do people not understand this is horrible? This is a terrible idea. And she goes, no, they don't, and so anyway, eventually she was like, you need to stop talking to me about the same stuff and write a book and get it over with. So that's what I did.
Our better half always knows.
She
And my
does.
wife is a immigrant from Portugal. Her family moved here in the 70s, so they had the same viewpoint on you know the things that a lot of Americans do take for granted, unfortunately, and
Yeah. Hmm.
it's a shame because we are blessed. We went back to Lisbon and Madrid for our 10-year anniversary, and culture shock is a mild word. when you see how lucky we do have it and the things we do take for granted here. So it's interesting from the standpoint of an immigrant, and you've been all over the world, that you feel as blessed about this country as you do. So um, I know in your coaching program you have four main pillars that you stand on. Can you describe those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the main idea, right, is it, I want to serve people who are like me. I serve people like me, right? Basically, why? Because I have a lot of compassion. Because people like me, we are idealistic, we're ambitious, we're driven, not because we're sort of ego driven, but because we want to make a difference in the world. We want to be on some level world changers, right? It doesn't have to be grandiose, but we have this sort of fuel, right, driving us. And what happens with people like that is that we tend to overinvest in our outer game and our skills, our abilities, and underinvest in our inner game, which is sort of our capability that is on a deeper level, allowing us to navigate life in general. Was sort of my problem. And I life coaching because somebody coached me and fixed me. Like they really redirected the very trajectory of my life. And because of that help, I was able to do so much more than I asked or imagined, so much more that I was destined even to do in the trajectory I was on. And those are the people that I want to serve, right? Basically. So I want people who want high achievement, but also they want high purpose. That's it. Now, the four pillars have to do with some of the things that fuel that or some of the things that get in the way. And basically, the first one is called fuel, right? And it's basically the idea that you can run on very mixed fuel. You know how you have a premium fuel car, and I think
Mhm.
high achievers are a premium car, like they're built to go. And if you put some low grade fuel, the car's not going to go very well. That's basically how it works. So the first one is basically what kind of fuel are you using every day? How much of it is ego? How much of it, how much anxiety, fear you have, all that stuff. And you basically upgrade the fuel. And now you're going fast, you're going beautifully, and you're going up. The second one has to do with momentum. And what happens with many professionals that are very driven is that they hit a plateau or even a wall, and they lose momentum because complexities, their character, there's blind spots, and weaknesses catch up with them. All kind of fact, life happens to you basically, and you see that a very distinct plateau, and you lose momentum. And when you lose momentum, you lose motivation, you lose self-esteem. So we work on giving somebody momentum. Where you want to go? How are you going to get there? What are you going to say no to? How fast can you get there? All of that. The third one is called resistance. And resistance is the stuff that arises from the inside and from the outside the minute you start aspiring for more. You immediately encounter a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of sort of inner blockings. It's guaranteed. And basically the goal is to get you to learn how to overcome that quickly. And the fourth one is basically, it's called the radar, and it's basically a holistic picture of your life. So you develop all of the most important dimensions of your life evenly and at an accelerated rate. So it gives you this longevity of success. So that's basically it. Yeah, it's not very complicated.
Well, it's not complicated, but it is hard because
Very hard, yes.
uh, what takes place in that is the introspective uh, look into your life, and that is the part that most people shy away from and run away from. We want
Yes.
to be surface level, fixed. I talk about this in my own journey, in my own path. You know,
Hmm.
we address our issues and we think we've dealt with them when really we've just kind of built a little mound over them, and then we drag them with us throughout our entire rest of our life until we actually go back and address them to where they can heal.
Hmm.
In my Um, in my practice, I talk to my clients about it being a scab versus a scar.
Hmm.
Because if it's a scab, we can still pick at it. It still bleeds all over everything and still causes problems. But when it's a scar, then we can touch it, address it, and feel it, and it doesn't, have effect on the rest of our life. So, going to the point of actually getting to that last level, yeah, we can present it as easily as you did, but doing the work is a tremendous amount of
Yeah.
effort.
Well, I mean, it's uncomplicated, and information about those phenomena, almost like the mechanisms of the human condition, are really fully available. The research is very self-evident. It's not complicated in that sense, and that's why information is so it's free. We live at this an incredible age, right, where we have access to the brightest minds in the world, and I can I've interviewed some of the top experts in human flourishing on my podcast. I mean, 20 years ago, that's that's unthinkable, basically, right? To have a conversation like this is in such detail and depth. um, and still that's not enough for transformation. For transformation, you need a guide, and that's why information is free, coaching is not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Implementation is not free either. That costs you your
Yep.
old self to be your better self.
Yeah, and it costs
Um,
you more than money. It costs everything: your emotional labor, your time. Money is actually the least of the investments, in my opinion.
yeah, and people, because there's not a immediate ROI. People
Hmm.
don't like money. You can see your ROI. The internal change is not the immediate ROI, although it
Yeah,
can be. So it therefore is something that people are less willing to spend their money on when it's the most transformation that they can get. And I always find it fascinating because when individuals, especially coaches, they talk about the transformation from the butterfly, the caterpillar to the butterfly, right? And they talk about this beautiful transformation. But what 99% of the coaches leave out is that cocoon part where the bean actually dissolves into goo and becomes an entirely new being before it breaks out of that cocoon to be the butterfly. And it's that messy part in the middle that gets
yeah.
missed, you know.
Mm, mm.
But that's where the beauty arises from.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a really good metaphor. Really
It
good metaphor.
um, it, it's fascinating to me that people can go from refugee, uh, 5 countries, international pop star, but yet still have that philanthropic give back heart that you've attained. And it took that transformation for that to occur in you. Now, you were fortunate enough that it happened a lot earlier than some.
Yeah.
Uh, some spend their whole lives chasing that. But look at the person you were at 26 versus the person you are now. It's not the only thing that's the same is your name,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, I
You're
agree.
you're not even the same man. You're
Oh,
vastly
absolutely.
different, right?
Hmm.
Um, if someone were listening to this and they say, "Man, I want to, I'm in a place where I need what Christian and Daryl are talking about," um, what would you advise that person?
I would say, I'd say your instinct is correct, in the sense that you want to accelerate something. If you're so clear about what you want to give your emotional labor, your time, and your energy to that, because what it would do, it will redirect your life, which is exactly what happened to me. If I hadn't said to my mentor, how do I get what you have, and basically dedicated years of my life just paying attention and being humble and doing what he says, I wouldn't have the life that I have right now, not even close, basically. And I think so. It takes a clarity, you know, and also it takes a decision. It takes one decision. I'm not going back. This is it. I'm all in. And I would say if you don't make that decision, you'll never experience the transformation, because transformation is costly. It is deep. It's painful, just like you said, right? It's that goo, man. It will show up, And if you don't have the courage to say this is it, I'm all in, you're not going to be able to go through that messy middle. You're not going to do that. But if you do say that and you say, I'm all in. I'm super scared. I'm nervous. I don't know what the ROI is, but I'm all in. I won't stop. And just tell me what to do. I promise you that you'll probably make some mistakes, but you'll come out on the other side a completely different person.
And I think that's where the beauty lies, because it's not coming out just a different person, it's stepping into your authenticity.
Mm.
And nothing, in my opinion, is more beautiful than a person who's living their authentic life. Because then they're being honest and real with every part of who they are, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a natural inner shine that comes out when people
Yeah.
are
Mm-hmm.
in that phase of their life. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a beautiful thing when people can actually step into that authenticity and stop worrying about what everybody else around you think, because most of the people aren't thinking about you anyway, and those that are don't know your life and what you got to get there. Because
Mm-hmm.
I could look at your life, international pop star, world traveler, 4 languages. Man, you lived a fantastic life. But I know nothing about the refugee kid
Mm-hmm.
who was in Chile. I know nothing about the trials that you went through on the streets of Mozambique,
Mm-hmm.
right? So why are you worried about how I think about that? You know that I don't. So I think when people get to that, that's a level of freedom that we strive for and very few actually attain.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, suffering does refine you. I mean, and I really believe in constructive suffering, uh, because you will learn either way. And if you teach yourself and you get yourself in an environment, in the guidance, in a system, in a almost like a structured approach to life, where you actually allow suffering that will build you up to happen every day. It's an incremental change that is hard to overstate. And most people, just because it's very primal for us to avoid suffering, our brain is literally wired to minimize all kinds of suffering and risk. So you have to sort of override these primitive mechanisms to be able to engage in constructive suffering, in the suffering that will make you stronger, better, deeper, more holistically developed. So the people that engage in that, they are the ones who inherit the earths, in the words of Jesus, right? Like, they're the ones who win in the long run.
And that I think is a huge difference, constructive suffering, because it doesn't have to be this miserable suffering that a lot of us
Hmm.
bathe in. It can be constructive to build you up and strengthen those muscles
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
will lead you to a better life down the road. Christian, I love everything about what you are as a person and who you are as an individual. And I ask this final question to all my guests, so I'm curious to see your answer. What does a warrior spirit or having a warrior spirit mean to Christian Ray Flores?
To me, and I will use I will use biblical language, Old Testament language. There's this interesting insight in the first chapters of the Bible, in Genesis, where God creates man, and the statement there is that God gave the man dominion. And to me, a warrior is a person who claims his or her dominion, the things that were given to her as a gift in stewardship. And it's, what kind of role will you play in this life? What kind of change will you produce? What kind of responsibility will you take upon yourself? What kind of assignment will you accept? Because everybody has one, and we just shy away from it. We're fearful. We don't accept it. But every single person has a dominion, and a warrior is the one who claims his or her dominion fully and lives out life in that dominion and claims it 100% for the service of others.
I've done over 100 of these interviews now for the last 2 years, and that is the first definition of it that has used that analogy, and I absolutely love that you bring a refreshing point of view to that, and I absolutely agree. Claiming your dominion over, as your God-given right is amazing. I thank you for joining me today, and may 2025 be a wonderful year for you and your family. This has been an honor and a privilege, and many continued blessings sent your way.
Daryl, thank you, and thank you for the work you do and the man you are as well. I know you are living out your dominion, and may it be truly a blessing and a transformation and redirect many lives.
I appreciate that. And to my audience, if any of you actually want to connect with Christian, you can connect with Christian Ray Flores, the author, entrepreneur, international recording artist, philanthropist, and high performance coach at exponential.life. And I do thank you all for joining us on another edition of A Warrior Spirit. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you catch all the episodes. And may 2025 be all that you hope for.